In a world without supermarkets, electricity, hospitals, banks, or a locked front door, survival depended on something modern life has made surprisingly easy to forget: other people. Imagine bringing home the biggest animal you have ever hunted. You are exhausted. You are hungry. Your family is waiting. But before you can take the first bite, other people begin asking for their share. You might have worked for the meat. You might have killed the animal. Yet keeping all of it for yourself could violate one of the most important rules holding your community together. And that is where ancient human life becomes uncomfortable. Some of the behaviors that helped our ancestors survive would feel intrusive, exhausting, or even unacceptable today. You could be expected to share food you earned, raise children as a community, move when the environment demanded it, and keep your ambitions from becoming too dominant. But these weren't universal laws carved into stone. Ancient human societies were enormously diverse, and most left no written rulebooks behind. Archaeology and anthropology instead reveal recurring patterns in human societies, especially among mobile foraging communities. And the deeper we go, the stranger the comparison becomes, because many of these rules existed for one reason: an individual could not reliably survive alone. The first rule was simple: if you had food, you shared it. Among several contemporary hunter-gatherer societies, food sharing is not merely generosity, it can be a strong social expectation. Among the Hadza of Tanzania, for example, large game meat is widely redistributed, and food can be requested rather than simply offered. To a modern person, that sounds generous. But imagine your fridge. You bought the food. You paid for it. You chose what to cook. Nobody is entitled to walk into your kitchen and demand half. Ancient life worked differently because tomorrow was unpredictable. Today you kill an animal, tomorrow someone else does. The next day, nobody does. Sharing transformed individual luck into collective insurance. And that creates the second rule: your success could not make you too powerful. Modern societies often reward accumulation. A larger house, a bigger business, more land, more money. These can increase your influence. In many mobile foraging societies, accumulating material wealth was much harder. If your community moved frequently, possessions became a burden. And social pressure could discourage individuals from behaving as though their success made them superior. A brilliant hunter might bring home more meat than anyone else, but that did not automatically make him king. In some egalitarian societies, decisions are shaped through discussion and consensus rather than permanent central authority. That would feel remarkably strange in a modern workplace. Imagine becoming the most successful person in your company, only to discover that your success gave you less freedom to dominate everyone else. And this leads directly to the third rule. You could not simply accumulate everything you wanted. Modern life is built around storage. We have wardrobes full of clothes, cupboards full of food, garages full of possessions, and houses designed to contain even more possessions. For a mobile human group, every extra object had a cost. You had to carry it, so possessions were judged differently. A useful tool made sense. A heavy object that served little purpose did not. Your home was not a warehouse. It was something you could leave. And that leads to a fourth rule modern people would find exhausting. You moved when the landscape required it. For many ancient hunter-gatherers, staying in one place permanently was not always an option. Food, water, seasons, and animal movements determined where people went. Modern life gives us the opposite experience. We expect food to come to us. A supermarket can contain food from thousands of kilometers away. A refrigerator can preserve it. A delivery driver can bring it to your door. Ancient humans had none of that. The landscape itself was the supply chain. Research on the Hadza has found substantial daily movement, with men and women covering several kilometers on average while acquiring food and resources. For us, that distance might be a workout. For them, it was Tuesday. But perhaps the biggest difference wasn't how far adults moved, it was how children were raised. The fifth rule was that childcare was not necessarily a private family responsibility. Modern parents often think of raising a child as primarily a job for two parents, supported by schools, doctors, childcare services, and relatives. Many traditional societies distribute childcare much more widely. Research among the Octa of the Philippines has documented children interacting with large networks of caregivers beyond their parents, including relatives and non-relatives. That means a child could grow up surrounded by many adults who knew them, watched them, and helped care for them. Modern parents might find that comforting. They might also find it incredibly invasive. Imagine your neighbors having an accepted role in deciding how your child behaves. In a small community, privacy could be very limited. And that brings us to the sixth rule: you couldn't simply disappear. Modern life makes anonymity possible. You can move to another city, change jobs, live behind a closed door, spend an entire evening without speaking to anyone. For a small ancient community, isolation was different. People knew who you were. They knew what you had done. They knew who you had helped. And they remembered. That made reputation a form of survival. Which gives us the seventh rule. Your reputation could matter more than your possessions. Today, money can buy privacy, transport, food, entertainment, and sometimes even professional care. But money cannot completely replace a trusted social network. In a small community, relationships could determine who helped you when you were injured, who shared food with you, who cared for your children, and who traveled with you when conditions became difficult. Your social reputation wasn't simply about popularity. It could affect survival. And that makes the eighth rule especially uncomfortable. You were expected to contribute. There was no clean separation between work and life. Finding food was work. Preparing food was work. Making tools was work. Maintaining shelter was work. Caring for children was work. And much of it had to be done repeatedly. Modern technology has removed an enormous amount of this physical burden. Machines wash our clothes, cars carry us, refrigerators preserve food, heating and air conditioning control temperature, computers handle information. The result is extraordinary convenience. But it also creates a strange historical illusion. We sometimes assume human beings were always meant to live with this level of comfort. They weren't. For most of human history, daily survival demanded physical effort. And then comes a darker rule. The ninth rule was that cooperation did not eliminate violence. For a long time, popular images of hunter-gatherers sometimes portrayed them as peaceful people living outside the conflicts of civilization. Archaeology tells a more complicated story. At sites such as Jebel Sahaba in Sudan and Nataruk in Kenya, researchers have found prehistoric human remains showing evidence of violent injury. The details and causes are debated, but the broader point is difficult to escape. Human cooperation is ancient, so is human conflict. Our ancestors could depend intensely on their neighbors while also fearing people from another group. That contradiction may be one of the oldest features of human society. And finally, the 10th rule may be the one that explains all the others. You had to adapt. There was no single ancient lifestyle. Some communities moved frequently, others eventually settled. Some depended heavily on hunting, others relied more on gathered plants, fishing, or later agriculture. Social rules varied enormously. What stayed remarkably consistent was the need to respond to uncertainty. Food could disappear, weather could change. Animals could migrate, a child could become sick, a hunting trip could fail, a rival group could appear. There was no supermarket to rescue you, no ambulance waiting nearby, no bank account to protect you from a bad season. So ancient societies developed something modern life sometimes hides from us. Interdependence. We have spent thousands of years building systems that allow individuals to become increasingly independent from the people immediately around them. We can buy food without knowing who grew it. We can live among thousands of strangers without knowing their names. We can raise children inside relatively private households. We can store enormous quantities of possessions. We can travel enormous distances without walking. We can survive for days without speaking to another human being. Our ancestors lived under almost the opposite conditions. They couldn't simply opt out of the group, and perhaps that is why these ancient rules feel so strange. The uncomfortable truth is that many of them were not designed to make life pleasant. They were designed to make life possible. Share when you succeed. Contribute when you can control your ambition. Carry what you need, move when necessary, wrong children together, protect your reputation, adapt when the world changes, and never assume tomorrow will look like today. The ancient world was not a paradise. It was harder, more dangerous, and often far less comfortable than our own. But it forced humans to confront a problem that modern civilization has partly hidden from us. No matter how advanced the technology becomes, survival has never been entirely an individual achievement. The fire may be gone, the camp may be gone, the rules may have changed, but the question underneath them remains: how much of human life can ever truly be lived alone?